Friends and neighbors, this here is the last topic in intermediate macro. And as I suggested at the end of the one about the post-Keynesian policy recommendations, this is a different school of thought. So we're done with the post-Keynesian stuff. We're done with the stuff where those economists thought that what Keynes said in the first place made the most sense. And now we're moving on to a guy named Sir John Hicks and his interpretation of the general theory. And why do I want to cover this? Well, a couple of reasons. Let me zoom just a little bit. A couple of reasons. One is that this is a popular view among policymakers, right? It's a very popular view in other classrooms. I don't know if any of our macro teachers teach ISLM curves, but it's very possible that they do. I know they have done in the past. And so this is what I learned. And it's also interesting because it's interesting to see what somebody else reading the same book that what we've done so far was based on came to such a different conclusion. And I feel a little sorry for Sir John Hicks because Paul Davidson, our textbook author, really leaned on him to come clean about the fact that this is a horrible representation of what Keynes said. That doesn't make it wrong. It just makes it not Keynes. Okay, so think about that. This is not Keynes, but it is Keynesian. When you hear something called Keynesian, this is one of the varieties of Keynesianism, but it is not Keynes. It could be that this is the absolute perfect way to understand the economy, but it's not what Keynes said. So it has a bad name. Now, it came from an article called Mr. Keynes and the Classics, published in 1937. Keynes's general theory was published in 1936. So this was right afterwards. And Sir John Hicks was sort of putting together a, hey, if you don't want to read that whole big long book, here's kind of a summary. Well, guess what a lot of people read? The summary. And the summary really, well, let me tell you this. There's nothing about fundamental uncertainty. There's nothing about agents' expectations being disappointed. Investment plays a very minor role. You end up with the economy coming to a point of equilibrium and stopping. So it is very non-Keynes-like. And like I said, Davidson was leaning on poor Sir John Hicks, who apparently was a really nice man. And John Hicks later wrote an article in the Journal of Post-Keynesian Economics kind of apologizing for this whole model. But that doesn't make it wrong, all right? So it's just not what Keynes said. All right, so I want to show you this, again, because it's very popular. It's what you might have learned had you taken this from somebody else. And B, it's more along the lines of what policymakers think when they're talking about Keynesianism and when they are using Keynesian policies. All right. So, let's see here. The first one. Okay, I need to draw this over here. Hey, you know what I did? I left my notes in the other room. And I don't want to stop the video because I'm not very good about figuring out how to make it. Did I leave them in the other room? Yep, I sure did. How to edit them together, two different videos. So, hang on. It'll just be a second. I think I know exactly where they are. Yep, I did. I left them in the bathroom. All right, let's put my microphone back on. There we go. Okay, so let me pull out these notes here. And the IS curve. All right, I'm going to explain that to you. And let me find my notes here on the IS curve. Here it is. No, that's not it. Oh, sorry. I'd messed up my pages. And now I see it. Okay. Now, I will have emailed you these answers by the time you see this, at least the ones with the graphs on them. But I got to go over it so you can understand what the heck I'm talking about, right? So, let's turn this. So this is not about the answer. This is about making sure you understand the answer. Let's see. There's a bit of a glare on the top there, but otherwise not too bad. Let me try this light. See, I told you, I have like actual movie theater stuff here. See these lights like this? This is from my Cowboy Economist series. And my father-in-law said, I cannot see you on the videos. And then he said, then that's a good thing. But then I went ahead and got the, good. That's where that glare was on the very top. Okay, so let's make sure that this works. All right, here is the IS curve. Now, let me tell you this first of all. He kind of breaks it up into the IS curve is the product market. It's goods and services. The LM curve is the money market. In the LM curve, the interest rate will be determined. In the IS curve, the interest rate will be determining, I suppose, in a way. But here, let me show you what happens. In the IS curve shows all the places where I equals S, where investment equals savings. All right, we're not going to have government spending. We're not going to have taxes. We're not going to have exports or imports. So the only injections and leakages will be investment and savings. The IS curve will show all the points where investment and saving are equal. The LM curve will show all the places where the demand for money or liquidity preference is equal to the supply of money. All right, so that's where the letters come from, and I hope that's actually a little bit helpful to know that the IS curve. Okay, that's everywhere where investment and savings is equal. LM curve, that's everywhere where and you got to think about liquidity preference, about the demand for liquidity, but all the places where the demand for cash is equal to the supply of cash. All right, now on the LM curve, I'm sorry, we'll do the IS curve first. Let's see, I'm trying to decide how I want to set this, which thing I want to do first. Let me just tell you this first before I start writing the answer out. Okay, we're going to assume that savings is a function of income, all right? And I decided to use the same Y that we did. It does make a bit of a difference whether you use uppercase or lowercase. Oftentimes uppercase is used for nominal and lowercase is used for real variables, but I'm not going to worry about that right now because we're not even going to get into that. So, savings is a function of income. That's actually very Keynes-like. Keynes did argue this, that how much you spend is a function of how much money you earn, and that the more you earn, then the lower percentage of money you will spend. Well, if income is a determinant of how much you spend, it's also a determinant of how much you save. So that's not inconsistent with Keynes, that first thing right there. The second one, investment's a function of the interest rate. What? That's it? You remember what Davidson had? Let's see, we had, I don't have them in order here, but we had all those four variables right there. And in fact, the interest rate, which was not exactly what lowercase I was, but it was related to it, was actually one of the least important variables. All right, the really important variable was this expectation of profit from investment. We don't have that in Sir John Hicks's ISLM curve, all right? So this is the first place where you see a spot where, and let me tell you this too, I used to have my intermediate macro classes before this Davidson book came out, read parts of the general theory, and then read parts of this actual article by Sir John Hicks, and my students said, my God, how could he have read the same book I did? He's left out so much of the stuff that was in this book. Again, I want to be careful about this. It doesn't make Hicks wrong, but it certainly makes what Hicks said not what Keynes said. Right? And yet you see all the time people citing things that Hicks said as what Keynes said. Well, they never bothered to read the general theory. They don't know what Keynes said. They know what somebody else said Keynes said. All right. I hope that was not too confusing. So let's see. Let me draw those two up here again. Savings is a function, oops, I'm sorry, I left my little F off there, of income, and investment is a function of the interest rate. Oops, a negative sign there because as interest rates go up, firms invest less, and a positive sign there because as you have more money, you save more. Now remember, we want to find all the points where those two are equal, all right? So guess what we're only going to have on our axes? On our axes, we're going to have interest rate and real GDP. Okay, we're going to have interest rate and GDP, interest rate and output, interest rate and income, because as you know, those are all the same thing, on the horizontal axis. And we're going to trace out the points on that graph that equate savings and investment. All right, here we go. First one. Now, if ever you decide to make up your own graph, or you're just thinking through a graph in a class, the way to figure out the way it works, okay, it's based on some equations, right? So I've got savings, a function of y, investment, a function, oops, sorry, I drew those a little bit too close together, of r. I've made up my own graphs. It's actually kind of exciting. And what you do is, to figure out how it's all going to work is, you pick a point, and you say, let's say for sake of argument, that the relationship works at that point, that at that point, savings and investment are equal, all right? Now, what I don't know at this stage is my line going to be positive, negative, vertical, or horizontal? So the way you figure that out is you pick out a new point. Like, for example, y sub 1. Now you know from the equation that moving from y sub 0 to y sub 1 will have increased savings. So if I want a point for the vertical axis for interest rates that is going to maintain this important S equals I relationship, I have to figure out, would interest rates have to go up or down for investment to rise in order to match the increase in savings? And of course the answer is that interest rates would have to go down. To make investment go up, interest rates have to go down. So aha! It must be some lower interest rate that would maintain the equality of S equals I. Would it be exactly that point? Well, it depends on what parameters we put in here. But the basic idea is that the IS curve is negatively sloped because, oh, and I should do this too. There. And now we've got the increase in savings and the increase in investment that we need. We assumed that this point right here, we'll call it point A, that point right there satisfied the condition we were setting up. Now, I haven't talked anything yet about, well, okay, yeah, sure, but would it actually do that? And that comes next. Right now, all I'm doing is just the pure math. Mathematically, if savings is a positive function of income, and if investment is a negative function of interest rates, if we start here and we say by assumption that S equals I at this point, and then we raise GDP, would the interest rate that correspond, and we raise GDP, which of course raises savings, would the new interest rate that represents higher investment to compensate be at a higher interest rate or a lower interest rate? It'll be a lower interest rate. You got to lower the interest rate to increase investment. So voila, as they say in France when they're doing economics, it turns out that we have a negatively sloped line. All right, so that's just the pure application of these equations to that line there in our condition that S equals I. We have nothing yet about the logic of it, about, well, why would that really happen, okay? And let me show you. This goes back to one of the very first study questions on leakages and injections. So the next thing I want to show you is why, and here's the next thing. If you really want to understand a graph in a class, throw it out of equilibrium, all right? Throw it out of equilibrium and then figure out, why can it not just be hanging out there off the line? What forces are acting to push it back to the line? And that's when you really understand what you're talking about, which is especially good for a L question. Let's see, let's use the Schwarz pen. So now we're going to do a little bit about the underlying economic behavior, the logic of why this line works in Hicks's model. Okay, let's once again start. Say right there. And let's say at that point that there's some value S sub 0 of savings that is generated at Y sub 0, and there's some value I sub 0 of investment that is generated at interest rate R sub 0. All right, now let's say that, let's see, well, I got a green pen here. I want to raise GDP, and I feel like that should be green. Oh my God, I hope the dog didn't run off with the green pen, because then we're going to find it all over the carpet. All right, well, anyway, I'm going to have to use the blue pen. Now let's do what I did a minute ago, and let's see. No. Let's do this instead. Let's lower interest rates. I want to do it that way because I think that'll be easier to think about. I'm going to lower interest rates, okay? And this is going to give us a new level of investment, say I sub 1. If we're hanging out in this space right here, there's a new level of investment, I sub 1, that is, what? Greater than or less than I sub 0. Well, since interest rates fell, I sub 0 must be greater than I sub 1 must be greater than I sub 0. Interest rates fell, thus raising investment. Now, so that means that at this point right here, investment is greater than savings. We're no longer, well, just leave it there for a second. Investment is greater than savings. And now I want to show you what you figured out for exam 1 on injections and leakages. Study question number 3. All those many years ago, back when we were allowed to walk around in public and talk to people and stuff like that. See the bottom 2 lines? If injections are greater than leakages, this raises Y, thereby increasing leakages until they are equal again. That's what we've got here. We've got injections greater than leakages, which means that the economy is expanding. There's more money being pumped into the economy than is leaking out of the economy through savings. That at this new lower interest rate, firms have started investing more, and so that means the economy is expanding. So guess what? GDP is going to go up. And how long is it going to go up? Wham! Until it hits that point right there, where this new I sub 1 that prevails at R sub 1 is now equal to a new S sub 1 that prevails when GDP is Y sub 1, all right? So that's why it works. And this can, you know, I've taught whole semesters using just ISLM curves. I'm going to try to keep it simple in here because I'm only doing a little bit of a sort of a sampling of it at the end of the semester. So the easiest way to think about this graph, not the only way to think about it, but the easiest way to think about it is think about the fluctuation in the interest rate first. Interest rates go up, investment falls. So the economy shrinks. So, you know, interest rates go up, investment falls, the economy shrinks and pulls back here. Interest rates go down, investment goes up, and the economy expands until it goes over here. So that's how it works. Everywhere to the left of the curve, investment is greater than savings, and that's why it is not an equilibrium point. The economy is trying to come back over here. And everywhere to the right of the curve is where you have investment is less than savings, and the economy is shrinking. All right, well, I'm ready to summarize this. And I've already emailed this to you. I'm just going to show you here the answer. You can sit and type it up if you want to again, and so you can pause the computer for a moment and write this down. I'm going to write it myself. I want you to really pay attention to this, rather than just do that. Okay. But I don't have a good spot for the whiteboard, clearly, which is why I have a Scrabble game holding the whole thing up. Okay, let me move the camera a little bit, and maybe that'll be better. There's the green pen! The dog doesn't have it. All right. Green pen. Okay, let me turn the camera over there. Yeah, this will be better. I can get in. This is not Meg's guitar. Meg took her guitar with her, but it's a guitar that is blocking my access to the whiteboard. All right. Number 111. Draw an I unfortunately have in my study question, draw an IS curve. Draw an IS curve. I just knelt on the mic. Good, I didn't turn it off. In what sense does the IS curve represent equilibrium in the product market? I don't know. Let's find out. The IS curve is the locus of points. It's like a set of points that I have in my notes. Equate S equals I. You can just write that S equal that I equals S. Oh yeah, sorry, comma, where S is a function of Y and I is a function of R. All right. So in your first sentence, all you've done is you said what I said initially when I set the whole thing up, that this is going to be a curve that makes S equals I, and S is determined by Y, and I is determined by R, and in that particular way, positive and negative. But this is always the interesting thing. Whenever you are off the IS curve, whenever you are off the IS curve, it means that either leakages are greater than injections. It means that either leakages are greater than injections, parentheses, S greater than I, or, and then I've written out here, injections are greater than leakages. How about we just write or vice versa? The former, okay, let's do it this way. I'm going to summarize it a bit more here. If S greater than I, then Y falls until S equals I again, parentheses, and analogously for I greater than S. All right, so I summarized what I had sent around to you guys here just now. If savings is greater than investment, so in other words, if the leakages are greater than the injections, then what's going to happen is Y is going to fall until, which is going to make S fall the whole time, until S is equal to I again. And then rather than write out the whole thing but in reverse, and analogously for whenever I is greater than S. When I is greater than S, then Y will rise until they're equal again. Let me put that in. Now you need a graph. You have to have a graph for this answer. But it's very, very simple. Let me do it in a different color so it'll stand out better. And won't get mixed up with that last line. Man, thank goodness they moved us out of the trailer. You know, we were in a trailer for 10 years, and each of us in our office had a big whiteboard. And they were ripping down the trailer. They said, hey, if you want to keep your whiteboard, you can. Voila. All right. Now, is my Scrabble board in the way? No, it's not. Okay. I slaughtered Melanie. Like on my first turn, I used almost all my, get a 50-point bonus, everything. So anyway, we're not playing anymore. All right, there is the IS curve, and I want you to have this on there. Everywhere to the right of the curve, investment is greater than is less than savings, which means we're going to contract and move back to the line. Everywhere to the right, investment is greater than savings, and this will cause an expansion until we get back to the line. And that is Hicks's IS curve. All right, let's see, that took 25 minutes, so let's go ahead and do the LM curve. Okay, the LM curve is more complicated. Are you ready for this? This is, the IS curve is not too bad. It's just two pretty simple relationships, and you practice it for a little bit. And remember, since we are going to have to do the exams as we've had to do them so far, since the apocalypse hit, that you're going to be block copying and pasting these things anyway. The place where it's really important for you to understand how this works is in a potential hell question. Because even though I'm not having you draw graphs on the final, I am having you play around with a graph and tell me what you figured out. Might not be this graph, I don't know, but you need to be prepared for that. All right, the LM curve. Now it's not a very long answer, as you can see here. It's not any longer. Here's the IS curve answer. Here's the LM curve answer. It's not any longer, but it is a little bit more, I'm going to say subtle. All right, the LM curve shows all the places where the supply of money is equal to the demand for money, where L is the demand. But here's the deal. Sir John Hicks's world is a world of exogenous money supplies, not endogenous. So he is not going to do what we had in the textbook or in anything else, or indeed what's implied in Keynes, and that is that the financial sector, the banking sector creates new credit almost at will, all right? And so we're going to have a fixed money supply. So whenever we talk about points where the demand for money is equal to the supply of money, it's always a fixed supply of money, all right? There's going to be some specific supply of money. And that means then that any of the fluctuation is going to be up here. So because there's two, where's my hand? Two, count them, two demands for money. There's going to be a transactions and a speculative, all right? And so how did I write this out here, John? Okay, like that. LT, yes, LT. I hope that all of you got that, or you should not be allowed to go to TCU. Hey, look at that. Once again, it's R and Y, and that's why we can be able to eventually put all these on the same graph, because they're being determined by the same variables. All right, the transactions demand for money, and indeed, this is referencing Keynes's transactions demand for money that we did on exam 2, where the higher the level of economic activity, the more money people need for transactions, all right? Obviously, in an economy that is, let's say, $20 trillion, you need more dollar bills. People will have more of a demand for using cash than in an economy of 10 trillion. So that's all that means. It means that as the economy grows, so people need more cash just for transactions purposes. As the economy shrinks, the opposite. The speculative demand, remember this study question here? I'm going to have my notes all messed up by the end here because I'm just picking and choosing things. Let's see here. I know I'm close. Oh, there it is right there. Okay. Remember number 55? Give it a second to focus. That was the speculative demand for money. That was the one that said when interest rates go up, people want to hold less cash. There's a certain amount of cash Keynes is assuming, and this is true to Keynes, this part of the this part and this part. This isn't, but this and this is, all right? The idea that when interest rates are really high, then screw holding cash, I'd rather hold bonds. But when interest rates are really low, well, I'll just as soon hold on to cash because the interest rates might go up later and then I can lock in on them. So this is for everyday transactions. And this is for how do I allocate my savings? How much of my savings do I hold as cash versus bonds? And if interest rates are really high, I hold very little of my savings as cash. If interest rates are really low, then I hold lots of my savings as cash because I am waiting to see if interest rates go up later. All right, now let's see. Let's do the same thing we did before. We're drawing a graph here, thinking about an individual point, and then what would have to happen to move away from that point. All right. Same axes. Don't tell me. Y, R. And let's say that this point happens to give us L equals M. And I find it handy, rather than writing L equals M every time to think this stuff through, L is really composed of two things. It is composed of that transactions demand for cash and of the speculative demand for cash. In fact, you might want to go a little further. What I did there was, in fact, let me circle each of those. Or not circle, I'm squaring them. In order to remind myself of what it is that determines transactions demand, I just went ahead and drew out the functional form. That's not exactly how you should write out an equation, but you get the idea here, right? That the total demand for cash is the transactions plus the speculative. And oh, by the way, the transactions demand is a positive function of the level of economic activity, and the speculative demand is a negative function of the current interest rate. Let's see, I'm almost off the page there, and I see I have a bit of room to slide that way. Oh, no, that's fine, isn't it? All right. Sometimes it's hard to tell on the graph. Okay, on the monitor. Okay, and remember, M equals set by central bank. It's fixed. There's a fixed money supply. So the question becomes how that fixed money supply ends up being split up between those who are holding cash for transactions purposes and those who are holding cash for speculative purposes. All right, so let's say that this first point happens to work, and I'm going to go ahead and draw it like this. M sub 0 equals L sub 0 equals LT sub 0 plus LS sub 0. So I'm going to be very specific about that at this point so we can follow all the things that are happening. Okay. God, I love this stuff. All right. I don't even think this graph is right, but it's still fun to